What's going on, everyone? Today we have the meta snapshot for patch 12.20b, and there was a B patch. They just fixed a couple of things there. They've said that this would be the last B patch of the entire set. They adjusted dragons a bit by removing high-end shopping, level up, and made a couple of various champion fixes along the way as well, because there is a regional finals in Japan and Korea that's going on this weekend, so they just need to touch things up a little bit here and there. But we already went over that in the patch rundown, so I'll spare you guys some time. Let's just get right into the summary for patch 12.20b. So the best comps right now, Graves Seraphine made its way all the way back up to the top. Olaf Reroll still very strong. Jade Soy'fen, Kaisa Reroll, no surprises there. Mirage, Daeja, Karma Reroll, Yone Reroll, and Dragons. They dropped down a lot, but they're still pretty good if you hit them. So don't be afraid to still go Dragons. They didn't kill them. They just made it harder to get and kind of made like the high rolls a little less high rolly. Onto the A tier, we have Lagoons, Guild Zippy, Xayah, Darkflight Rengar, Mage Nomsy, Whispers, and Built Different. And then B tier, same as last week, Dragonmancer Kaisa, Astrals, Grave Nilah, and Darkflight Cannoneer. Everything else, there's MasterCard, but not really. So yeah, just don't play anything else. I would say you could play some C tiers every now and then, but since we have so many other comps to try out right now, I wouldn't really touch the C tier because you don't have that much time in the day. There are already like, what, 15 comps there? I didn't actually count, but someone can feel free to do that if they are bored. But starting with the S tiers, Graves, Seraphine, Pantheon, this comp made a resurgence because every other top comp got nerfed. So a lot of times things get buffed up to the top. Sometimes only the top gets nerfed so that the A tier comps rise up a little bit. And things like that just kind of happen a lot in TFT, and that's where the Graves, Seraphine, Pantheon comp kind of settles in right now. The only downside to this comp is that it's a little augment reliant. So we have the list of augments you want down here, luckily. So we have this for every single team composition, and you guys can access that on my website, bunnymuffins.lol, when you guys have time to, or if you need it for reference in the future when you're playing after you watch this video, for example. But overall, like, Zac is going to be your front line, and this comp did get a little bit better because Zac got buffed in the last patch. So Zac is an incredible unit right now. I think they doubled his healing or something like that in patch 12.20. So he's just going to be that much more of a threat as a tank now. And since the comp was already good before that, and all the other comps that it was competing with got nerfed, it's kind of like a no-brainer that this rose up at least a little bit, right? But the way to play this, Seraphine 3 is the win condition. All you really need, though, is a Morello and a Zeke to do like at least top 4. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Early game, you have some item holders here, and you have some conditions if you want to read out on the entire how to play section. But a lot of people played this comp in the past, so I'll skip over onto the next composition. We're kind of nearing the end of the set, so raise your hand, hit the like button if you guys are excited for set 8. We'll definitely be hearing more about that soon, because I think the next set is about to drop in maybe 40 days, and they released the PvE patch like 2 weeks beforehand, so we probably only have around like a month left of this set before we start on to set 8. So again, at the end of sets, we kind of know how to play most of the comps already, so we kind of just do more of a quick run through just to give you guys a refresher on the most important parts you need to know about a composition, and then if you need to know more, you guys know where to find the rest of the resources for that. So next up, we have the Olaf reroll. Not too much has changed here. RFC is a great tech on him, i.e. very high damage item. And then Hand of Justice gives him a little bit of healing. Since he has the RFC, he doesn't need the Bloodthirster. But if you don't have RFC, I do recommend getting the Bloodthirster instead. Pantheon going to be a secondary item holder, same with Soy'fen. And they all use very similar items, so that's a very good thing as well. The way you play this, you stabilize on 3-2, or you skip the 3-2 roll down if you're a bit healthy, and then stabilize at level 7 at stage 3-5. And then overall, the grand scheme of this, or the grand plan for this comp, is getting 3-star Olaf at level 7. So the way to do that, you just roll down to 50 gold every turn until you hit him, and then all in at some point if you don't hit him. If you guys are wondering what like reroll means and things of that nature, slow roll, hyper rolling, I did make a video on this before, so I'll leave a card up here for you guys to reference in your spare time. So the great thing about this comp versus the Seraphine Graves comp is that you have a lot more different variations with Olaf, Scalescorn, Whispers. In the past, we did a mage version because you have Lilia, and then you could run Zoe plus maybe Silas because he's like a brawler and whisper unit. You could run stuff like 4 Scalescorn like you see here. You could run 6 Scalescorn if you get the spatula for it. You could also drop down to 2 Scalescorn, run a couple more warriors, maybe 4 or 6 warriors if you guys are inclined to do so, or maybe you get a warrior emblem. or you just hit like a Yasuo 2-star for free, like maybe you want to switch into that. So lots of different options there. That's the good thing about this comp, and that's like the same thing for a lot of S tier compositions. Some of them, they're not static, as in you can make a lot of little substitutions. So what that means is it's a little more consistent, because imagine you're playing cards, right? Let's say you're playing Go Fish or something like that. Normally in Go Fish, you're like, hey, do you have any 9s? I don't, because I'm single, but let's say you have the option to ask for a couple of different cards. You're like, hey, do you have any 10s? Do you have any queens? Then maybe you could get a couple more hits, but unfortunately, Go Fish does not work that way. You can only ask for one card at a time. But in TFT, if you're going for multiple units, you can hit more consistently. So that's all fine and dandy. Let's move on into the Soy'fen comp, one of the more popular comps of the patch, recent patches that is. And this is going to be around like 5 Jade, 4 Whisper, 2 Dragons, Xiaoyu, and Soy'fen. They're really the only 2 champions you care about. You can itemize Pantheon, you can itemize Jace. It is a free country after all. But the main focuses are going to be the Soy'fens, because, I mean, that's the name of the comp, right? You normally don't get this many items. A lot of people have commented in the past, they're like, hey, how can you put like 10 items here? So 10 items means 20 item components. Well, I'm not saying you should build every single one of these, if not the comp won't work. I'm just recommending you some items in case you're like playing Xiaoyu, you filled up your Xiaoyu items, and then you get item grab bag, or on the Treasure Dragon, you get like a bunch of different items. You're like, what should I look for there? Maybe you could itemize Jace with something you see around here. So that's why some comps have a lot of items and why some comps have a few. It's not that one comp like desperately needs like 50 items or this other comp only needs 3 items. That's not the case. It's just, if it's very important and it's like gives a pretty good power spike, I will list out the items, but you always have to identify the main carry. And we normally do that either in the name of the comp up here, or down in this like description text down here. Like notice down here, Soy'fen, we explicitly list out his items, and then we say Jace can be used as a supplementary AP carry. So if you randomly get a lot of AP items, which are useless on Xiaoyu and Soy'fen, you can go ahead and just drop the AP onto your Jace instead. So that's one of the ways to use that, and hopefully that helps some of the people who are wondering like, hey, how come you have so many items here but not so many somewhere else? But this comp is super strong. You really want to roll at level 8. That's the preferred way to play this, because you're going for Xiaoyu, you're going for Soy'fen, Jace, and Pantheon. Those are all tier 4 units, and level 8 is the best time to roll for those, because it's a good mix between having enough gold to roll for them and pretty good odds of hitting them. But some games you have to roll on 7. The trick about this comp is you have to recognize when you need to roll on 7, when you're good at 8. And yeah, that's pretty much the harder part of the comp. Some late game substitutions you can make is maybe dropping Jax or Gnar for Soraka in the late game, because Soraka's healing is really, really good in pretty much every comp, both the player health and the in-game health. So let's move on into the next build. We have the Kaisa reroll. So Kaisa, she got nerfed across the board, but very, very slightly. It's in the notes all the way up here. Yeah, so she lost 5 damage pretty much at every level per thing that she shoots, right? So it actually adds up to be quite a bit, but still pretty playable because Zac is really good right now. And yeah, we do note down here that the composition is maybe around the S- tier right now, but we'll have to wait and see how people actually value it. We'll be able to see how the top pros are going to be approaching the game this weekend in Korea and Japan, and that has huge implications on how all the other regions are going to play out their finals as well, because those happen next week, and there will be a patch, but it's going to be a very small one, so a lot of the games will be very, very similar. And if you guys didn't know, I partnered with I Miss Void Sins to make this tier list, and he's super helpful, very knowledgeable about the game, like Challenger every set since set 1, he peaks at top 10 somewhere, sometimes even higher, and so he's just a very good authority on the game, and he studies a lot of these tournaments in order to help us identify the best comps of every single patch. So requirements of this comp, it's really just Kaisa and Zac 3. You don't care about anyone else. This is very typical for Dragonmancer comps. I know we only have 2 Dragonmancer, but you only have 6 units here, so you could level up to level 8 after you hit and run either 4 Dragonmancer or like 2 legendary units. But yeah, that's pretty much all you need for this comp. You don't really need that much else. A lot of other reroll comps, they're like, oh, you need to hit the 3-star whatever, and then you need to power level up in order to throw in those big synergies. And that's still true of this comp. I'm not saying you don't benefit from being level 8 versus level 6. I mean, it's like saying, Would you rather have $100 or $150? Of course, you'd always rather have $150, but maybe to get the Dragonmancer Kaisa chibi from all the little eggs, you probably only need 100, but sometimes you need 150. And okay, that's pretty expensive for some little legends, but hey, if you like it, you like it. I personally don't care. I just use the Dango. Point being is it's always nice to have more, but it's not required, you know, at least in most cases. But a lot of rerolls in the past, they really required those deep vertical synergies, so you would need to power level, but this one, it's still nice to have, but it's not like mandatory, so you'd rather prioritize getting Kaisa 3 and Zac 3 over just having random units in there. We list out the items for Kaisa down here. Most important is IEJG. The third item doesn't really matter that much. Zac, generic tank items will do, preferably the solo tank items such as Stoneplate, Dragon's Claw. Those are gonna be much more effective on him because he pretty much is solo tanking. I wouldn't really consider Jax or Nasus or Malphite, or even Volibear for that matter, actually contributing to any of the tank stuff. Onto the next comp, we have Mirage. Mirage, not too much has changed here. Daeja, still very, very strong. S- tier, but yeah, it's just very solid overall. All the variants work pretty well. I would say the only weird one's Electrocharge, but Pirates works as well. That's probably my favorite because you get a ton of gold from that, and you can read in how to play each and every variant down here, but you really just want to focus on Nunu and Daeja items. That's going to be your bread and butter. So another thing you can do with this comp is you could pivot from this Mirage build into the Dragon comp. The Dragon comp, I believe, is a little lower. Let's skip to it now. It's like the turbo late game comp, and we'll talk more about this later, but Aoshin and Daeja, they use very similar items, so you could swap back and forth between the two pretty much on command. So if you do have a lot of gold to head into level 9, that's something you can consider whenever you're playing Daeja. Now onto Karma Reroll. This one, still pretty solid. A lot of people hate this comp. I'm personally indifferent about it. I do like me some Reroll, but is this a little too stable once you hit Karma 3? I don't really know. It was touched slightly in 12.20, but it didn't get hit in 12.20B, I believe. So it's pretty much the same comp. You're just focused on Karma item and then support items for Karma after that. Reroll for her at level 5. And yes, she wants 3 glove items, so you just get as many gloves as possible from all the carousels, and that's really all you need to do there. Let's move on into the next composition, Yone Reroll. This one is highly augment dependent. So it's either, like overall, it's like S-. If you don't have the spatulas, it'd probably be like B tier or something like that. If you do get the spatula or scope weapons 2, not 1, it has to be scope weapons 2. You could play this comp and then it's S+ tier, but it's very inconsistent. That's why it's like debatable S-, A+. It depends on how you're judging compositions. If you like do hit it and you get the perfect augments, it's one of the best in the game. But if you don't, you're just gonna be playing something else, which is fine because look, you use a Rage Blade, you use a Giant Slayer, Daeja uses the same thing, Aoshin can use the same thing as well. But yeah, reroll for this at level 6 for Yone 2, and then eventually Yone 3 at level 6 as well. You can pick up Braum 3 on the way, and yeah, there isn't really that much to do. It's pretty easy comp. Next comp we have is the Dragon composition. So this is like one of the highest cap boards in the late game that you can consistently get. Obviously, like the best late game would be 3-star of every single legendary, but not very consistent, right? But in terms of like just 2-star legendary caps, this is like the golden standard, you know? But you do have to remember they removed level up and high-end shopping, so you don't have those high-rolly games where if you get those, you just hard force this comp. But it's still pretty good. You could still get there. They weren't like the make or break in a lot of cases. But overall, you just need mana regeneration and ability power on Aoshin, some healing either from an augment or from an item, and just 3 generic tank items on Terra or Idis, or preferably both. Siobhan is a great late game cap. You could also run Aurelion Soul here. You don't have to run these exact 4 dragons. Aurelion Soul does a pretty good job as well, but I'd say Aoshin and Terra are the 2 most important ones. Onto the next build, we have Lagoon, Sohm, and Nilah. This is just a blue buff Morello build. Very classic comp. It's just, unfortunately, it's the only comp that Sohm ever works in because mages are a terrible trait. And people have complained about this in the past. I've complained about this ever since mages were a thing, like when they were invented. Like, A lot of these mages, they rely on getting multiple casts off, and that's where their power comes from. It's like every 4 casts or every 3 casts or every like 10 casts, whatever it is, you get a big bonus. And if you're not running mage trait when you're playing those champions, it's essentially useless, right? So Sohm can never exist in a non-mage comp. You can't run like 12 Lagoon Sohm with only 2 mages, for example. That just wouldn't work. So I hope they fix that in future sets, but I'm complaining a little bit too much. You really just focus on Nilah and Sohm. So again, you'd prefer to roll at level 8, but sometimes you need to do it at level 7 to stabilize. You still have some 3 costs you could hit to stabilize. You have Sylas and Seraphine, and maybe getting a Xayah too if you don't have it yet. All very useful. But yeah, pretty solid comp overall. They're just better ones. All the ones in the S tier are like a little less consistent, but their spike is so big that it just completely outshines the Lagoon comp. Zippy carry and Xayah, we're gonna loop these 2 in the same bucket. So just because someone looks different doesn't mean you can't loop them in the same bucket, right? Of course, I'm kidding there. But Zippy, it's a great pivot because Xayah loves guilds, and you run Xayah in both comps, and Zippy and Shyvana are both dragons, and they share very similar synergies because guild Xayah she likes both guild stuff and she likes Ragewing stuff. So it's very interchangeable, and then you could even put Zippy items onto Xayah because Zippy uses a lot of attack damage items. For example, you could throw the IE on Xayah if you pivot into a Shyvana later on in the game. But if you do want to commit to the Zippy playstyle, all you have to do is reroll for Zippy 3-star, and you typically do that at level 8. You don't have to go for it, but it's pretty solid if you really, really enjoy Zippy. But you could also leave Zippy at 2-star and play stuff like Xayah carry or Daeja carry. Another popular version of the guild comp is doing guild Mirage, which just revolves around Daeja instead of the Xayah, and it's pretty much the same thing there. Onto the next build, we have the Xayah Ragewing comp. For this, the only difference is you just stack ability power on Shyvana. You really only want to play this if you get Shyvana. It's pretty useless without it, and yeah, you'll just bleed out unless you have like at least Shyvana 1. The reason why is because you really want to hit that 6 Ragewing spike. If not, the comp's kind of useless. Moving on into the next comp, we have Darkflight Rengar. Rengar, he hasn't really been touched, and everyone else has been. I could make a joke there, but a little inappropriate. One mistake I see people making whenever they play the Darkflight Rengar comp is that they line up everyone in the back, because that's what people used to do with Zeke's Herald with Aphelios. But you may have noticed already, we have Rengar between the Sejuani with the Zeke's Herald, and the Zeke's actually activates before the unit gets sacrificed. So I've tested this, other people have tested it, and that's why people position all on the 3rd row here. And keep in mind, you only do this when you play Rengar Darkflight. If you're playing Aphelios, having Aphelios in the backline outweighs the benefit of getting an extra Zeke's proc. So just keep that in mind when you're playing. But yeah, the way to play this is you want to get a reroll going at level 7 for Rengar 3-star. And yeah, you often run double copy of Rengar until you get Rengar 3. So this comp is a little different from other rerolls in the past. The difference between 2-star and 3-star of that unit is astronomical, and it still is here. But luckily for this comp, you have that kind of mid-game breathing room where if you get 2 2-star Rengars, you're still playing both of them and you're still getting some benefit from having 6 copies of Rengar. Whereas typical rerolls or classical reroll, you don't really get that much benefit from having 6 copies of a unit. So that's how this reroll is a little different than the rerolls in the past, and I think that's actually a good thing. Obviously, if you get stuff like Double Trouble, you just automatically top 3 at least, but that doesn't always happen, right? So there's some other augments down here, like the Cybernetic one. Any Cybernetic is amazing on this because you just shoot out so many items. Soy'fen is incredibly good too. You have to be a little creative with it. There's no like set guide on Soy'fen because you could literally use any trait, but there are a lot of cool things you could do. One interesting thing to note is that if you get Force in Nature, this comp becomes so good because you get the Darkflight essence, and you pretty much turn a non-functioning item into a very big functioning item. So it's kind of making a lot out of nothing. It's like recycling, right? Except recycling doesn't make that much, but you do make it out of nothing, I guess. So still good to do. Keep recycling, I don't know. I've heard that some people or some cities don't even actually recycle. Okay, I'm digressing. Back to Mage Nomsy. Okay, yeah, Mage Nomsy still decent. Mages have been getting spanked a bit lately. Kind of like how the Yankees did against the Astros recently. So that's a little unfortunate. I'm from New York, if you guys didn't know. A little depressing, but mages got nerfed like every single patch in the beginning of the set, and they're still suffering from those consequences. Luckily, Nomsy is still in the A tier, pretty comfortable spot, but it used to be so much better. I feel like Nomsy is better the lower elo you're at. So if you're in like below Masters or below GM, I feel like Nomsy has a bigger power spike than higher up you go, because the difference between Nomsy 2 and Nomsy 3 is astronomical. The difference between having Zoe and not having Zoe is astronomical. And some games you just don't hit Zoe, and some games you just don't hit Nomsy 3. So a lot of times you're just stuck with Nomsy 2, and you could still win a lot of boards with Nomsy 2 in lower elo. So that's a good thing about this comp versus others, that once you hit your power spike, it's pretty good. So the lower you are, the more consistent it is. And since less streamers are playing it, because it's less consistent the higher you go up, it's kind of like a cheap trick to climb with if you guys are into that. I actually made a video on how to climb only Mage Nomsy, and you guys can check that out down here. It's on my YouTube channel. It's pretty much like a 2-hour compilation on how I use Nomsy to climb up to Masters, but very, very good stuff. He just stabilizes so dang hard, and if you get like Axiom Arc on him, it's just GG in a lot of cases. So very good comp, pretty solid. You could scout out mages and cannoneers in order to find out what type of Nomsy it is, and if it's neither of them, it's going to be Evoker Nomsy. If it is one of them, well, then it's going to be one of those units. So just scout other people's boards, right-click the mages. It's like Vladimir, Talia, things like that. Or who are the cannoneers? It's like Senna and someone else, Aphelios. And you could just see if Nomsy appears up on the trait. You'll know if you could force him or not, because if it's mage, then you're good to go. Onto the next build, we have Xayah Pantheon Whispers. A little bit of a weaker comp compared to everything else we've been going over, because Xayah just hasn't received that much love from the game developers as of late. She's still playable, don't get me wrong, but just not quite the same power as she had before. And then Pantheon, he's being jacked by every comp in the game right now. Everyone steals Pantheon as like just a random secondary carry. So it hurts a lot, because if you're running Whispers, he's going to be really good, and people are just stealing him from you. So be careful when playing this comp if a lot of people are going for Pantheon. On to the next comp, we have Built Different. Not too much else to say here. If you liked Built Different, it did get nerfed slightly because you can't get double Built Different anymore, and that was pretty much a free win. But you could still get like Built Different and Double Trouble. That's still fine and dandy. Really good combination, because you could run multiple copies of a single unit. And again, same type of gameplay down here if you want to check that out. Onto the next comp, we have the B tier, Lee Sin. Not as strong. You'd rather run like Karma, and Karma's stealing a lot of your Dragonmancers. So it's literally like these 1-cost units are just trolling the 3-cost carry comps. So a little bit of a paradox there, you know. It's like the stronger carry is just weaker than the cheaper carry, or the more expensive carry is. It's also less consistent, so lots of ifs, ands, or buts right there. But items for Lee Sin, IEJG, and then you could do Hand of Justice, Hextech Gunblade, Bloodthirster, any sort of healing item will do, or a healing augment. And any of the on-kill effects are really good, so like Thrill the Hunt, Axiom Arc can be good for him. All these augments, if you ever get them for Lee Sin, it's just pretty much auto-win if you get Lee Sin 3. The trick is you need to get Lee Sin 3, which is the very hard part. It's generally hard to get 3-cost 3-stars because their power level is relatively high. They're like comparable to maybe like a 2-star legendary, and you have to sacrifice a lot of your economy to kind of get that. So if you do hit, congratulations, you're going to beat all the 4-cost 2-star carries. But if you don't, then you're just weaker than them because you're a 3-cost unit versus a 4-cost unit. Onto Astral Mages. They've suffered from success because they're so good before, and Astrals are played in a lot of different compositions, only in the early game though. So it weakens this comp because they nerfed Astrals a bunch, they nerfed Mages a bunch, not because of this comp, but because of the econ traits. So it's just, yeah, it's literally suffering from success, and it's hard to play this comp because of that. The good news is that a lot of people don't actually play this comp. So if you get past the early game and you're relatively healthy, you could re-roll it for free. We have the loot tables down here. We have some gameplay over here. I think this video actually has like almost 100K views if I remember correctly. So that's kind of cool. Let's actually check it out. We have, oh, it's a 3-hour video. That's really long. But it's got, okay, yeah, 89K views. Let's see if we could get it to 100. Ignore all the stupid Chrome add-ons I have for YouTube stuff. It's really ugly. I don't recommend actually getting them unless you really care about the stats. I don't even look at them anymore. I used to maybe like a year or two ago, but I should probably just uninstall it now. I'm just too lazy. Oh, if you guys want like other content, I do plan on doing like how to grow on YouTube stuff on like a different channel, but that's to be announced in the future. So keep an eye out for that if you are interested in that. Yeah, I'm pretty much doing like 2 different games as well. I'm gonna do Omega Strikers and Marvel Snap because a lot of my friends are playing those games. And then I'm gonna have like 3 other IRL YouTube channels. So I'm gonna be pretty busy in the upcoming future. I'm also working on like a TFT project, which hopefully will help a lot of you guys out in the future as well. That hopefully is coming out in like Sett 8, maybe Sett 8.5. We'll have to see, but I'm pretty excited for a lot of stuff in the future. But going on into the next comp, we have Graves Nilah. Not too much else to say here because no one's actually gonna play this comp. If you guys are one of the few that are going to play this, let me know down in the comments below. But the reason why is because they're just better Graves comps. The Seraphine comp at the top is better. The Nilah with the Sohm comp is better. But if you really want to play some random 4-cost flex builds, it's over here if you want to check it out. Darkflight Cannoneer, just play Rengar instead. It's pretty much the same build. You want the Zeke's Herald with the Darkflights, but Rengar is just a lot better than Aphelios, so there's not much point in actually playing this. Keep in mind, again here, the positioning difference. We have the Zeke's Herald up here that's giving no value because we want the Aphelios in the back line. In the Rengar comp, since he's an assassin, he jumps to the back line. We could have him in the 3rd row so that he gets the benefit of the extra Zekes. Just slight differences there. Everything happens for a reason, right? Not many things are just randomly put out there. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the comps. Let's go down into the tournament meta if you guys are interested in that. So I just had Voidsins update this, and he's been studying, he's been seeing what the top players in other regions have been playing. And so far in like the recent tournaments, like the last chance qualifiers for a lot of people, Kaisa was still being played a bit, a lot of rerolls, and we'll have to see what happens in Korea and Japan because people play a little differently. A lot of people associate Korea with very aggressive playstyle, so they level up really quickly and they don't really care that much about economy as much as like North America, for example. North American players tend to like force a lot more as well. Europeans, they're more flexible. That's the general consensus I've seen, but of course, every individual player is different. Just because someone is from a certain state doesn't mean they are a certain type of person. For example, people think of California as like a Democratic stronghold. People think of Texas as like a Republican stronghold. But did you know that in California, only 46% of people are Democrats and 24% of people are Republicans? So if you go up to a random person, there's a 1 in 4 chance that someone in California is actually a Republican, which is pretty high considering most people think that like, oh yeah, California is like 90% whatever, but it's really not. And the amount of like unregistered or unaffiliated voters is like a pretty big portion as well. And if we go to Texas, I'm actually on a survey from Pew Research, and it says that 40% of the population leans Democrat. So it's like, you can't just make assumptions just because it's like a saying in the mainstream or something like that. For example, like in the media or like on Twitter or something like that. So if someone says like, oh, EU acts like this, or NA plays like this, Korea plays, it all depends on the actual player, right? So just keep that in mind. Those are just some playstyle patterns that I've noticed between each region in TFT though. But I'll let you guys read this in your own time. Again, this is all on my website, bunnymuffins.lol. Cap Dragons, yeah, it's still the strongest board in the game, even with the nerfs. It's just harder to get, so it's gonna be appearing less often now. Item changes, sword is the best right now, and the reason why is because Soy'fen, they love tens, they want like 50 swords, right? It's kind of like the Game of Thrones, like throne room, right? They have a bunch of swords there. Bow is really good to complement the sword, and then tier is used for a lot of the reroll comps. If you want to do like, some comps revolve around like blue buff, some want like the Hand of Justice, and tier just generally builds a lot of good items. You could do like Archangel Staff, things of that nature. Shojin for Aoshin. Belt, just the best defensive item right now. And then you have everything else. I will make a quick note that Glove, if you're like just hard forcing Karma no matter what, maybe you want to start a Glove, but it all goes down to your personal preference and playstyle. I'd say most things are takeable other than Negatron, and then my favorite right now would probably be like either Sword or belt, because that fits my playstyle. Even though belt's the 4th choice here, if you like something and you know how to make it work, there's no point doing the other ones just because it's like numerically better. But if you don't know how to play that item start as well, you're just gonna end up doing worse, right? It's different if you're trying to like learn every single item start. If you do that, then obviously you wanna test out everything, right? But if you're really trying to just focus down and climb because the set's ending soon and you just need to play like 10 games this week just to see how far you climb and you don't have time for any more, then just stick to what you know. But overall, the summary we have, again, Grave Seraphine, they're just good because everything else got nerfed. Same with Olaf Reroll. Soy'fen still good even though they got touched a little bit. Kaisa Reroll, Karma Reroll still pretty solid. Mirage Daeja is great for AP comps and then transitioning into the Dragon comp. Yone Reroll, only do this if you get specific augments. And then the B tier, and then the A tier and B tier, all pretty solid, but there's so many S tier comps right now that I just wouldn't play these unless I had a really good start for them. So I'd actually go like only S tier this patch, and then if you get a good start, go for the A tier, and then probably ignore the B and C unless you're playing like 100 games and you're like, hey, maybe I have like 5 games for some of these B tier comps or like 10 games, whatever it is. But that's pretty much going to be it from me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this is the last B patch, so maybe we only do 1 update next patch and 1 update the patch after that. They will do something fun probably in patch 12.22. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Let me know your guesses for that, and I hope to see you guys. And if you guys, let me know your guesses for that in the Discord. Let me know your guesses for that in the Discord, discord.gg/bunnymuffins, where we have pretty much a lot of other viewers like you and me that just kind of chat there, hang out, talk about TFT, talk about random stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you guys found this video useful, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.